The level of officiating in this country is so bad.
It's a weird game first and foremost, but United are just a dislikable team, aren't they?
Why are we trying to decide what they saw rather than the blatantly obvious that everyone is seeing?
How can it be clear and obvious if they have to watch the replay 17 times and slow down to like 3 frames a second?
Every single one of these games has a contentious VAR or referee decision.
Or Spurs fans on Twitter saying, surely the yellow should be rescinded then. No, he still took his top off. That did happen. Hello and welcome back to Panenka Weekly, the ludicrously tasty podcast. Game week 6 has been played and we're back once again. To
Rory, Rory's taking these much better. Have you just given up?
I'm
just staying quiet.
I'm just scared of what's going to come the week after, so I just grit my teeth and just wait to see what Clayts has to say.
It's the highlight of the podcast. I'm just worried that people are going to tune in just for the first 10 seconds.
The compilation at the end of the season is going to be great, though, isn't it? Just think of that. Just think of that. Where was I? I was saying it's been a pretty spicy week of Premier League action, hasn't it? We've had a lot going on. We're going to get into some of those big topics, which I'm sure you're aware of as you listen here, thinking, are they going to talk about that? We'll talk about VAR. That is a fact, definitely. We've also, though, had the end of the transfer window. We've had 2 game weeks actually gone by, so we'll touch upon both of those with a big focus, really, on the most recent weekend fixtures, as well as some fun stuff, I'm sure. But I am joined once again by both of those voices, which you've already heard, which is, of course, Tiges. How are you?
Very good. I'm doing well, Rich. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm good. I'm quite excited for this one. I feel like there's a lot of nice topics to get into.
Definitely.
This week.
How's it being back at school?
Horrible, yeah, hate it.
What is this, third day in?
Yeah, third day, first day back with the kids being back, though, so it's been a long one.
Oh, I can imagine. And straight to the podcast. So this is the first time you're doing the podcast straight from work.
Yeah, it is. Which maybe we'll see in my performance, my podcast performance. We will see. But we're also joined by Rory. Rory, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you, mate. Not quite used to working on Mondays again, by the sounds of things. Same as you with the bank holiday last week. Now I'm all good, mate. Looking forward to getting into all things VAR very shortly.
Yeah, exactly that. No cricket this week?
Unfortunately not. It was a quiet weekend this weekend, just as well, really. I think the bank holiday weekend was more than enough. Also off work on Tuesday of last week. But yeah, I'm back in.
How did the poker go in the end?
Yeah, we won't discuss too much of that for any listeners. I played in the Goliath tournament at Coventry Building Society, aka the Rico, on Tuesday. But unfortunately, I was back at work today. I wasn't the person taking down the 200 grand prize pool for first place last night.
That is a shame. But we'll continue nonetheless, even with that disappointment. And speaking of disappointment, another brilliant segue from me there, if I do say so myself. Liverpool only managing to draw to Everton at the weekend. It was very disappointing for the red half of Liverpool. Rory, I'm sure you join me in that.
Yeah.
0-0. What did you make of it? We'll go to you first.
Yeah, I thought, well, both teams probably had the chances to win the game, didn't they? You look at the Mopé chance, certainly for Everton, and Liverpool, I mean, that one section of play where they hit the post and Pickford tipped one onto the bar, or the other way around. How on earth they didn't score there? I mean, Salah hits the post with about 45 seconds to go. It's probably Pickford's best game, wasn't it? It really felt like a World Cup year, or a time where he's going to be called up for England very soon, because he seems to put in better performances then, doesn't he? A bit of a frustrating game, really, but as I say, both teams probably felt like they had the chances to win the game. But it's always an interesting fixture. I mean, I think we've had a ridiculously good run, really, haven't we, recently against them?
Yeah.
I did feel a bit disappointed, but I think I was more disappointed after watching City at 5:30, and it was a bit of a case of what if, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. When you see other teams drop points, you kind of think, But then I kind of categorised it. It was a Merseyside derby, so it was one of those where if you drop points in them, it's kind of stands alone as a fixture, doesn't it? And I think going to Goodison, they're going to be horrible. And I think they actually played quite well. And yeah, as you mentioned, Pickford definitely man of the match. He seems to do that against Liverpool fairly often, makes himself the main story. But Yeah, I kind of make it standalone as its own fixture, and I was disappointed, but I wasn't as worried about the performance as I have been in a few other performances this season. Tigers, what did you make of it?
Well, it was just one of those games, wasn't it, for Liverpool? You could have 2-3, could have been 3-0, and you probably wouldn't have batted too much of an eyelid. But a poor start to the season for both of these teams, but that result could definitely send them both in different directions. For Everton, I think it was a brilliant point. But for Liverpool, you need to build up some confidence, because that has been a poor start to the season. You really did need to win.
Yeah,
it has been poor, yeah.
Well, I think the issues are just so clear, and they're being illustrated week in, week out.
What, the midfield?
For Liverpool, yeah, definitely.
I mean, the bench looked a lot stronger, didn't it, on Saturday? That's one thing I've got to say. You compare sort of what we looked like. We looked really thin, didn't we, for a couple of games whilst Nunes was suspended. But Jota came back. He looked well off the pace, I thought, when he came on. But you'd expect him to...
He's bound to, isn't he?
Yeah, of course. You expect him to play minutes again in the week in Europe. Klopp seemed to like him a lot in Europe last year. Melo was on the bench. Thiago, I think, returned to training this morning. So, there's a bit of positivity there. I have to say, I was quite glad to see Robertson get a bit of a rocket behind him and be dropped, because I just think that might have been good for him. I mean, a couple of people have said he's not been too bad. I don't think he's been anywhere near his normal level for the start of this season. But I guess how often can you keep churning in the really good performances? It is so tricky, isn't it?
I actually thought he was pretty good off the bench as well. Coming on, Robertson in that game was it maybe and Tsimikas, when they've been doing that sub a lot, hasn't he, Klopp, on about 60, bringing Tsimikas on. I think he likes Tsimikas' crossing. I think if you look at the numbers of balls being delivered into the box by Tsimikas, it's a clear ploy, and I think it's what Robertson needed. I think he was better when he came off the bench as well, and the less said about the other fullback or the other fullbacks in that fixture, I think the better, because Trent was not particularly great, and then Milner, I feel like a harrowing experience watching Milner at right back for 21 minutes where he played there.
Yeah.
Do you think we've got to start giving a bit more credence to the seasons before? I feel like there's so much of a smaller gap, and it must have been so mentally exhausting for Liverpool last year. Really, every single week you had to win, and you're in 4 tournaments right up until the end. That must just be tiring on your mind, tiring on your body, and now it's almost like a hangover into this next season.
100%.
I kind of feel like this could be a good season for Liverpool, just to relax a little bit, almost not worry about winning the league, take the pressure off, try and come comfortably top 4, do well in Champions League, FA Cup. I don't think that'd be the worst thing. Almost turn it into a kind of a transitional season.
Well, I think they need to bring the average age down a bit, don't they? I think that's the one thing that people keep saying, is we have got a lot of older or aging players now, and maybe this transfer window just gone, January, and next year is maybe the time where we try and bed in a couple of younger players now. I don't quite know where they're coming from or who they are at the moment, but
Jude Bellingham has to be the one, doesn't he?
You're Bellingham in, but then you've got Carvalho in already, you've got Elliott in there, so if this is a season where they're just bedded into the team, ready to go for a proper season next season, it might not be the worst thing, but it's difficult to buy that patience. I mean, Klopp's bought that patience with his history, but football fans are fickle, and if you're not winning week out, and football fans are used to winning week in, week out, it's a tricky thing tricky seas to navigate, I'd say.
But then you had a season ago, you came into top 4 in the last day of the season, last couple of weeks of the season, and I know there were more extenuating circumstances that year, but you still went through the same thing, and he wasn't at any point under pressure, was he?
No, I think actually those extenuating circumstances buy you that time, don't they? Because nobody said it was Klopp's fault that we had that many injuries. I think there's still a bit of criticism that we didn't go and sign a centre back earlier, but again, the proof is in the pudding. You have the season that we've just had last season after holding out for the centre-back, going by Konate, who everyone agrees is really good. So, those extenuating circumstances probably do buy him the time, and I think, not that he needs to buy the time, I don't think we're discussing Klopp going or anything here, but it's still part of the conversation, I suppose, that you want to keep to those standards, don't you? But with the midfield issues this year, maybe it is a time to reset, as you say.
What do you think about his comments about the owners and taking a bit more of a risk? I know it was kind of blown up, wasn't it? But we've always spoke about how Liverpool are sensible in transfer market. Van Dijk was a good example, wasn't it? You didn't get him when you wanted originally, but you had fire and you got him at the right time as a right player, so you sort of waited, didn't panic. So you've always kind of done the right thing.
I think that was just, those comments I think were just that showing how desperate he was for that midfielder, because he clearly thought that they needed to go and do something, and Klopp doesn't get that desperate very often, and he did it, I think, in quite a smart way where he wasn't slating the owners. He was saying, I completely understand why they don't, but if it was me, I'd maybe take a bit of... He did it in quite a smart way, didn't he? I think he's actually managed the relationship there, because the relationship between an owner and a manager, as we've seen quite a lot with some of the Scott Parker stuff recently, is a really strained one. It's very difficult to get right, isn't it? And I think he actually managed it quite well. Yeah,
and there is one thing which can render everything you've done before mute, despite how good a job he's done. If they ever fallen out, they could still get rid of him. People's personalities do shine through sometimes, and if they had a big blowout,
how stubborn he's going to be about it as well. Like, 100%.
Just one
exactly. But Everton, it was a good result. Sorry, Rory, go on.
Say one final point before we moved on to Everton. How unlucky was Firmino not to start? How good he's been the last couple of weeks, and Nunes is back. It's all right, getting back in. And my point was really
it was a bit harsh.
How bad Nunes was before he got sent off against Palace. It wasn't like he scored 2 goals and then got sent off and was going, oh God, he was so good, but a moment of madness. He was absolutely terrible and then got sent off. And like Firmino's been probably our best player for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. But the problem is, if you think back a game before that, you think of Fulham, you've got Firmino being the reason, like being slated. It's just, that's a tricky call there, because imagine he starts Firmino and we are as bad as we were for the first half against Fulham, for example. Yeah. And then suddenly you've got people going, you've got Nunes on the bench, why have you not started him? Then you're throwing him on in a derby. It's a tricky one, and
could have went either way.
I guess the conversation is coming up because Nunes wasn't very good on Saturday. He was one of... Well, I suppose he nearly scored a really good goal. Pickford made a decent save, didn't he? But, I guess he's only going to be judged in this,
goals.
Yeah, in this weird little way where Haaland signed, and he's going to be so harshly judged because of, a guy only a few miles away is absolutely banging the goals in.
Yeah, show me Nunes after he's had a run of 10 games in a functioning team. I think we'll have a bit of a better picture, because I don't think he was particularly bad, because I think, like you say, if he scores that volley, that Torres-like volley, you're coming away going, what a player again, aren't you? It's just
what a decision by Klopp to put him in.
Yeah,
exactly. That's my
small
point,
margins.
Sean. Yeah, I suppose that's my point, isn't it? It's like, you live and die by the sword, I guess, don't you, as a manager, and that's what they're paid the big money to do, isn't it? Make those tough calls.
Yeah. It's always a gamble, really, isn't it? Like, who is anyone to say this way or that way works better than the other?
People
sort of, it's luck sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I manage my sixth form team when we're in sixth form, mate, so I think I've got a bit of experience to say what should be.
That's true. Happen. That's true. You should get Klopp's number.
We always forget.
Although don't he threatened to ring in a Bond Hall, wouldn't he? He might ring in next week.
He's on the line. Here he is, actually. He's here now. We'll move on from that early kickoff. I think there's a lot to talk about. As you mentioned, Everton, I think, do deserve a little bit of praise. I think some of the football they played was quite nice, cutting through Liverpool a few times and did create chances. There was a VAR call in that game, which we will come on to later on with the Cody offside, which I think we do agree is offside. Despite, I've looked on Twitter today, I've seen Tony Bellew going off on one about how it's a conspiracy and how he was onside. And to be honest, that was enough Twitter for today.
Does he tag Matt Letizia?
Let's turn it off. But just quickly on Everton, do you think, I was looking at the table, 4 draws out of 6, is that good or is that bad?
I think they're overachieving.
Well, you would.
I think it shows how bad they've been going forward as much as anything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is a weird one though. They're not actually losing a lot of games.
I know, that's why it's strange. But then the teams that they have played makes a big difference. If they want to be pushing for the top half, they should be beaten.
I mean, Cody and Tarkowski, you're going to be fairly solid at the back with those two. They're solid Premier League performers, aren't they?
Yeah, Mope's a good player. When next time Calvert-Lewin injures himself trying to tie up his shoes.
Yeah, or
on the catwalk.
I was going to make a comment. I was like, I don't know where to go with this without going too far. Let's move on to, I think, a really interesting fixture, the next one, which was Brentford 5, Leeds United 2. Not sure too many of us saw this one coming in our predictions, but a hat-trick from Ivan Toney, Brentford looked brilliant. Leeds a bit shell-shocked in this one. 5-2, Rory.
Yeah, Ivan Toney in my dream team. I guess that's the first logical place
I
to
knew
start.
it would be.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it wasn't in mine.
Did you see his tweet where he just had a dig at everyone who took him out?
Yeah, I did see that, and I sent it to somebody who was going wild that they took him out, which was quite nice.
Probably Tony Bellew.
Tony Valley hated the VAR in this one as well.
To be fair, there was a bad one, wasn't there? This one, the foul, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't great.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brentford's looking good.
We digress slightly, but no. I mean, what a great game. Brentford, yeah. I mean, the machine just rolls on, doesn't it? I mean, they've that's a couple of games now where they've really put goals in the net, which is what they kind of lacked a little bit at the back end of last season, didn't they? They looked like they'd really kind of fallen off, but fair play to them. They're performing admirably this season and made some quite smart signings, haven't they? Through Damsgaard and players like this. They've got some nice youngsters coming through. De Silva's back after a long injury. They've got Lewis Potter. I think Leeds, I mean, it's a bit of a freak result, I think, from where they're concerned. They've started really well, haven't they? But is that maybe a bit of a throwback to sort of Bielsa's Leeds, isn't it? That, we're gonna shoot, you're gonna shoot, and let's see how many goals we end up with each. It's not maybe the most disciplined performance from Leeds, but yeah, it was a really fun game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit erratic, but I really like these two teams this year.
Yeah, same.
Even Leeds,
they
contributed quite a lot to the game. Yeah, they're a good team, I think.
Don't you?
I quite like how they just kept fighting back. It was one of those annoying games for them where you're never quite in it, but you get close, and then Brentford take a next step, and you're always that one step away.
Yeah, it's like
but they just kind of still went for it. Conceding 5 is a big worry. Yeah, exactly. Did you say it's like cross country?
It's like cross country at school. That annoying kid who just keeps sprinting,
waits for you to get up to him, and then he just takes another step. It was exactly like cross country.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was watching it thinking.
Tried, but yeah, conceding 5 was a bit of a worry. But Ivan Toney, look, like you said, he looks a brilliant player. I'm surprised that more people didn't go in from at the end of the season. There seems to be a real lack of good strikers.
United,
but someone who can
crying out for right?
How good would he have been for United? I think because you've got a player who's big and strong, can play up front by himself, but has also got a lot of skill. He scores free kicks. He's got decent pace. He's a good finisher. There's a lot to like about him. I'm surprised people didn't take a go on him, and that goes to Chelsea as well.
Does he get a seat on the plane?
I was going to say that was my next question. Would you have him in the England squad?
So hard, isn't it? It is so hard. I mean, it's particularly tricky because I don't watch Tammy Abraham every week, but he seems like his main competition, doesn't he? In terms of Kane's obviously going to go. Heaven forbid he got injured. I think he's going to really struggle. I mean, Rashford's bouncing back to form. That's something I didn't see come in.
And Sancho.
Yeah,
both of them didn't make the last squad, did they?
Well, they were in the Euros, weren't they?
I know they're wider players.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? We've got so many nice players around the front, like Foden and Grealish and Mason Mount and players like this. But Tony's just so different, isn't he? He's like a proper striker, if that makes sense. Yeah,
he's someone you want when you're trying to soak up a bit of pressure. He'd be a great person to put on.
He's 18 from 18.
That's 15 when you want to.
On his last 18 pens. I think maybe that might be worth a place on the plane.
Yeah, for no other reason.
Yeah, Thomas Frank was mentioning the penalties actually in his post-match game. He talked about how England have been in a few penalty shootouts.
But have you seen the way he takes his penalties? Can you imagine we're in a final and he just does that arrogant little step up? My stomach would fall out.
He'd be an amazing five-side penalty taker, wouldn't he? When they say one step, it's only one step. He's that's all right. That's how I take him anyway.
Yeah, that's all he takes in 11 side.
Perfect.
Yeah, great player. But both of these teams should just want to be comfortable this year, shouldn't they? And I think they both will be.
I mean, we're looking at Brentford 7th, Leeds 9th. I think both would be very happy with that after the first 6 games, wouldn't they?
Yeah, agreed.
Next game, very controversial one, this one, and another one which we're definitely going to dive into a little bit deeper when we get onto our VAR conversation and the state of officiating in the country. But Chelsea 2, West Ham 1. I mean, it's all about the decision, isn't it? It's all about the West Ham disallowed goal. Kai Havertz coming up with the winner in the 88th minute as well. What did you make of the whole episode, Tigers?
Well, first and foremost, the actual football of this game was pretty yawn, wasn't it? Two teams I'm not particularly bothered about watching too much of. It was all about the events, VAR, which, like you said, we'll talk about in more detail, but it was ridiculous. Where do you even start with it, really? It was just wrong, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to discuss it, but do we even need to discuss it more than just saying, "Oh, that's the wrong decision," wasn't it?
When something happens and people are almost in universal agreement,
yeah, that is bad.
It beggars belief how it happens. But one thing about Chelsea, I think their squad is starting to take shape a little bit now.
Yeah,
especially with the players that they signed. I was really interested to see Mount not start.
You hate him.
I don't hate anyone. I just don't think he adds much. You know, and I read some Forbes report about how he's one of the most valuable players in the world. And if he's worth 150 million, I'm worth at least 20 million. I don't get it. But he's got to be the one to drop out. When everyone starts, you think they're looking like a three at the back with marauding full-backs.
Yeah.
Aubameyang up front. So, a couple of players have to drop out. It looks like it's going to be Mount, I think.
It was an interesting.
So that'd be quite interesting.
An interesting lineup when picked Pulisic up front in this one with Sterling.
Me. Yeah, that shocked me.
That was a bit of a strange one, bit left field, wasn't it? Leaving Havertz on the bench as well. Who I mean, who's going to be their top goal scorer this year? You'd imagine it'd be Havertz, even with Aubameyang coming in.
Does Havertz make it? This is what I mean. There's going to be someone who has played quite a lot and done all right by them in the last few years has to drop out.
Yeah.
If they're going to use that focal point. And maybe they won't. Maybe Aubameyang just doesn't make his way into the team, which would be strange. But maybe Havertz and Mount, but maybe they both drop.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Havertz go a little bit deeper, maybe. Loftus-Cheek makes way, Kovacic drops back to the 6, and Havertz maybe plays in the 8.
Yeah, I could see something like that potentially.
With the legs of Gallagher as well.
Yeah, and do you find it interesting that he's stuck with Gallagher? Because I think you mentioned it last week that it's 2 shockers in a row. I think he was a bit better this week, actually. I still don't think he was amazing, but he's sticking by him. He clearly fancies him.
Yeah, I think you need to in times like that when there is a bit of pressure on, throwing him right back in should be a nice hit to his confidence. He must think, okay, manager does trust me, despite the fact they've had a bad couple of games. Because if he dropped out then for a couple of weeks, that could have had a really adverse effect on him. So I think it was the right decision.
Yeah, and I guess they've come away with a win there, and maybe it was the right decision despite all of the controversies. The next game, Newcastle 0, Crystal Palace 0. I think the less said about this one, the better. A very goalless draw. Does anyone want to say anything about it?
No, that's enough.
Just 0-0s are rare, aren't they? They seem these days in the Premier League.
Yeah, 2 this weekend as well.
But also, sometimes there is an opinion of teams that actually is not correct. Like before Wednesday's game and this weekend's game, it was almost like Palace and Newcastle were both doing really well.
Yeah,
they've won once each.
Yeah. No, it's really. I mean, because we saw Newcastle against City, didn't we? Was the thing. We think they're brilliant, and really, they've beaten. Who did they beat? Was it Forest first game of the season? I think they
drew quite a lot.
They've drawn 4
exactly
of their 6.
Myers up there.
Yeah,
and that Isaac, or however you pronounce his name, he missed a really good chance, didn't he? I still think they're going to miss Wilson.
It's actually no wins in 5 for Newcastle now, which is a bit mad when you think about it, isn't it?
And Palace have just done really well against half-decent teams without particularly getting many results. So these are the sorts of games where you think maybe they could show where they are and get a statement win. Just wasn't to be, was it?
Maybe it's a very fair showing of where the 2 teams are then, a 0-0 draw in this one. One thing to mention on it is the Willock foul decision, the VAR decision, where he clearly just gets shoved into the goalkeeper and the foul given. What did you make of that one?
That was mental.
It's just wrong again, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely mental.
Yeah, it's crazy because I don't understand how you've got a replay of it and you still don't change it doesn't make any sense to me, because what are they thinking, that it wasn't a push? That's the only thing I can think of, because if it's not much, if they're not deeming it enough of a push, then he does go bundling into him, doesn't he? But surely, how are we watching this and thinking, Why are we trying to decide what they saw rather than the blatantly obvious that everyone is seeing? It baffles me.
Again, 95, 96, 97% of every person who watched that would disagree with the final decision. They would have done it in seconds. I think one quick look at that.
Exactly, yeah.
And yet they've taken ages again to come to the wrong decision.
And, I mean, we'll come on to this maybe later on, but it comes down to, I feel like it's just an over officiating of everything. There's too many rules about everything where they've got this clear and obvious thing where suddenly they've made up these thresholds and they're trying to justify their decisions when really, can we not just write a rule in that is just common sense? That can we all just take a step back and go, all right, we just need to make the right decision here. That's a common sense decision. Like maybe do a vote in the VAR room or something, because it's baffling that they are taking this long and looking at this much because they're trying to look at the finest details of the rules that that have been put in that about different thresholds of. It makes no sense to me. Like common sense, please.
The worst thing is they've gone from it has to be clear and obvious to override.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into this more, but how can some of these decisions be clear and obvious errors, or when they are, they still don't get them right? It's just, it just makes no sense. I mean, the Odegaard one's a perfect example of how can it be clear and obvious if they have to watch the replay 17 times and slow down to like 3 frames a second?
That was exactly my point in it. I couldn't believe that they overturned it, having had to look at it so many times to decide whether it was a clear and obvious foul. If you're going with the language of clear and obvious, you shouldn't need to watch it that many times. And also, it wasn't as if he didn't deliberately not give it as a foul to start with. He very deliberately watched that tackle or that challenge and didn't give it because of this higher threshold for fouls. It was a conscious decision. It wasn't like he missed something. It was he made a decision, like an actual decision that he was being really sure with it, wasn't he?
He was in a great position to see it. He was so close.
He saw it completely.
We'll talk about the United game and then the VAR. That was one of the most frustrating ones of the lot because you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
The second he went down, you knew they were going to score. You knew he was going to bring it back, and you knew it was going to be overruled.
Yeah, until you start thinking, oh, actually, they've brought in this new rule, haven't they? Which annoys me more that they make a point of these new rules that have come in, and they last about 3 weeks of every season, and then they go back to normal, and then next season there'll be another one like it. We'll get to the time wasting, because it's exactly the same thing. Like, they bring in these new rules, we're clamping down on time wasting. Did anybody watch the Newcastle-Liverpool game? Please. Clamping down on time wasting. I mean, the most amazing thing was when Pickford got the yellow at the end of the derby, because he hadn't actually time wasted the whole game and then gets a yellow in at a time. But anyway, we digress on that, because they bring in these rules at the start of the season, and then it makes it more. It points out and highlights these decisions even more because they've brought in these new rules and talked about them,
like the handball
and then
last season.
Like the handball
17
rule.
times.
Exactly. Like, if they didn't just highlight them as much, nobody would be talking about them as much, and it doesn't confuse things. And then you have all these debates with Tony Bellew on Twitter who doesn't even understand the rules, and then it's such a mess. It's all such a mess.
Mm-hmm. Ridiculous.
Anyway, we'll talk about refereeing in a bit. Let's move through to the next game.
How itching are we to talk about? We should have done the VAR first.
We really should have done.
Every single one of these games has a contentious VAR or referee decision.
I guess the question we'll ask is, where do we go from here? What is the solution? That can be the conversation afterwards, because we'll talk about, as we go through these games, all of the poor decisions and all of the VAR calls. But I guess the question is, how do you fix it? What do we do? So maybe that's what we'll move on to afterwards. The next game is a bit of a stonker, this one. Nottingham Forest 2, Bournemouth 3. Did anybody see Bournemouth coming back from 2-0 down in this one?
No. But can I ask you a question? Which
you can.
Because I was looking at this, I was researching this. So how many teams in the Premier League have had a better start to the season than Bournemouth?
How many teams have had a better... Well, where are they? 13th? So 12.
But the teams that they played, I'm just trying to illustrate a point.
Yeah.
It's almost like Bournemouth are they're dead and buried. They're struggling. They're in absolute disarray. But I know they got pinged 9-0. They lost their manager. But the teams they've played to the position they're in, I think what a start they've actually had when you look at it for the most important factors.
Yeah, 2 unbeaten.
They played Arsenal, City, Liverpool, and Villa. That's 4 of the best teams in the league in their first 6 games. But I think they've had a great start. And sometimes maybe the negativity of a manager, it was just so dramatic. It seems like the right decision, isn't it? I mean, I know it's only been 2 games, but 4 points from it. Sometimes when you remove that negative energy, sometimes it helps, and it seems to have, at least up to now, had the desired effect.
I mean,
yeah, it does seem very much like they're either going to be blown away by a team, or they'll actually be quite competitive. There's no in between, is there? I think the worry was that how already in those Arsenal, City, Liverpool games, how easily they were completely blown away. But maybe those games aren't really their business, are they? So maybe it's not an issue.
No, if you lose 2-3, 4-0, you lose 9-0. Goal difference is not always that important. If you can bounce back quite easily, if you can lose to City one week but beat Forest the next, you're going to hit your objectives as Bournemouth.
I mean, there's 8 teams covered by 3 points at the minute. It's insane.
It's very tight, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you look at like Leicester, for example, who have lost every game. So, they've drawn 1, right? So, yeah, maybe we are exaggerating how bad Bournemouth are a little bit. I think a 9-0 loss will do that, but maybe the change of manager was the right decision, and maybe we're writing them off a little bit too early here. Great comeback.
It was only when I was researching it, and I was thinking, and it just sort of dawned on me that this might not be the worst team in the Premier League, like everyone's thinking. Seems a bit harsh.
Yeah, you might be right. Another promoted team that is impressing then is Fulham, but they did lose this one to Spurs. At Spurs, 2-1. Kane getting himself a goal. He's now gone clear as the 3rd highest ever goal scorer, right? Mitrovic in the goals as well, getting a late one to make it a little bit nervy.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
Spurs continuing to grind out results.
14 points,
what do you reckon,
unbeaten.
Rory?
They've played a couple of decent sides now and still got the wins, and they're going into the game against City on Saturday level points with City. Now, if you'd have offered them that after 6 games, they probably would have ripped your hand off. But yeah, I think Spurs, they must be happy. They've got to be, haven't they? What really has been, it's been a really good start, and I'm surprised by maybe we kind of looked after the Chelsea game, didn't we? And we said, they don't really look that good. They still look like they're kind of a bit far apart. And I guess Sean's point about Bournemouth kind of maybe needs to be echoed again for Tottenham. It's been a better start maybe than a lot of people realise. They've just been quietly going about their business, floating under the radar and picking up solid wins.
Yeah, I think we're basing it off the one game where Chelsea have actually looked quite good this year. I think Chelsea have only looked good in that one game, and it just happened to be that Spurs one, which is a high-profile one. So maybe we're judging them off that when really they're going as most people expected them to after their signings in the summer.
Yeah,
and it's been a really good start. That game against City will be a big one. Will definitely be a big one.
I just think they're not in a good patch at the moment, but they're winning so many games.
Yeah.
And for the last 4 or 5 years, Son has been one of the best players in the world, and he's not contributing anything. Imagine if they can get him fire again, which he probably will. At some point in this season, he'll go through a really good patch, and they're going to be unstoppable at that point. So they haven't had their purple patch yet. They're still going nice and strong, which is a very un-Spursy-like thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very Arsenal-y thing, right?
But Fulham were good again, weren't they? Mitrovic scored, great goal. They gave it a go and didn't crumble, which would be a great sign, which was a great sign for them. So I don't think they'll be too dismayed.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's one of those free hits, isn't it, this for Fulham? I think they'll be happy enough. I mean, maybe not happy enough, but I think they'll be okay with not picking up any points in this one. Speaking of picking up points, a big win for Wolves against Southampton on Saturday. 1-0. They needed that, didn't they? They were struggling for points up until this. It lifts them now up into 14th. 2 wins. Well, no, it's 1 win and 3 draws now, isn't it, for Wolves? They did need it. Rory, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a terrible amount to say about Wolves other than, like you say, they just really did need the win. They've been pretty average, haven't they, really, this season? They just...
Yeah.
It was a proper win, how you expected it probably to come, 1-0. There's not going to be many thumpings handed out by Wolves this season by the looks of things. But I mean, defensively, they look pretty good. Nathan Collins seems like a good pickup. He seems really solid at the back.
It does, yeah.
But they really did need the win, and they got it. And it's just now a case of, can they kick on? I think they've got quite a bit of a hard run coming up now, because they play Liverpool away and then City at home off the top of my head. So really, I think it was a must-win Saturday before going into those 2 games.
What do you make of the transfer business? So the big guy coming in, doing his ACL immediately, and now looks like Diego Costa's on his way. That's an interesting one, Tigers.
Diego Costa, what's he going to... He almost seems like the exact same problems that their current strike force have. His sort of age catching up with him. Injuries catching up with him. I'm not sure if he's the answer. He's definitely going to add a bit of housery to games, isn't he? He's definitely going to help him get over the line. I don't know. It just seems like...
I'm quite excited for it, though. To be
yeah,
honest.
we love to have him in the Premier League, don't we? Whether he's what they need, or whether they just need to get Jimenez playing all the time. The more Jimenez doesn't play, the more he doesn't build up his confidence, the more he doesn't build up his fitness.
Yeah, it's tricky because they're trying to put wins on the boards, and it's how long you stick with someone like Jimenez, who's clearly not in form, and then Kaladzic coming in. They've clearly tried to build towards using him, and now he's out injured. It's
Yeah, so maybe it's not the worst stopgap. It will be fun for us. We do love him, don't we? But that was their first win for 154 days, Wolves. I know there was the summer in the middle of it, but that's still quite a lot of time.
Fair by saying it that way, doesn't it?
yeah.
It's still a lot, though. And no prizes for guessing who that was against. Villa. Whenever there's a stat like that, it is always Villa.
That stat reminds me of when it was like COVID and football stopped for ages, and then we were like, they haven't won in 4 months. They haven't played.
You can manipulate the words, can't you? Do you remember when Liverpool went 3 months without winning between March and May?
Yeah. Very good.
We didn't play. But I think Southampton will get dragged down into it now. I know they had some great results, but I still think they will.
I just don't know if they're as bad as maybe people think they are. They're a strange team, though. Like, losing 1-0 to Wolves there is a bit drab, and then they'll go and beat Chelsea midweek. They are a strange team. I don't really know where they stand, but I don't know if they're as bad as maybe some people are saying they are. Final game of Saturday was a good one for you, Tugs. Aston Villa won. Manchester City won. Getting a point against City. Got to be happy with that, right? Yeah,
not expected, was it, at all? And how many bets did that result break at the weekend?
Oh, yeah, must have done so many.
It could be season changing for us, really. But what did we say this time last week on the podcast? We were saying, Stevie Gerrard could be really struggling after these 2 games, Arsenal City. We could be bottom, we could be dead and buried, and our goal difference could take a significant hit. When in reality, Arsenal obviously better than us, played better than us, deserved to win, but we could have got something out of the game.
Yeah.
And yesterday, we did get something out of the game. On Saturday, we did get something out of the game.
Yeah, and could have got a bit more. What did you make of the Coutinho decision?
See, I was out and about, actually. I went to watch a wrestling in Cardiff for the weekend, and I was getting text messages from Rich. Well, yeah, Tyson Fury was livid. But you sent me, I was getting, the signal wasn't good, so I was getting messages were coming and going, and you made me livid. It was you, Rich. I was absolutely devastated.
I sent you screenshots and everything, didn't I?
You did, yeah, and it didn't paint the most realistic of pictures, because when I actually saw it, like, a lot happened. Happened, didn't it, between him scoring, and everyone had basically stopped, which doesn't solve it, because it was still the wrong thing, but I don't feel too bad. I'm okay with it. Yeah. Coutinho, would he have still buried that if the ref didn't blow the whistle and everyone all the defenders are still playing? It would have been much harder. But still, again, it's just that wouldn't have happened to United.
No, it was just
that's the annoying thing.
Terrible refereeing, terrible officiating. That it is rubber stamped by the fact that in the end he did put it in, even if Ederson was having a drink and the rest of the players were walking, and it might not have gone in if they actually played after the whistle. They played up until the shot, but it's still just so frustrating because you see so many times where they don't blow the whistle, where it's like meters like tens of meters offside, and they were like, no, the rules actually say you need to keep. They'll keep.
They
playing.
wait for the flag usually, don't they? And then people are getting hurt now because they're leaving the real obvious ones, but you have to play to the whistle. And then that one, he puts his flag up.
It didn't even feel offside. No.
Like what? If there's ever a time to let something go, it's for those.
Those ones where they are coming back onside or back offside, like they're going two different directions. Those are the ones where you never really can tell. And
they're the ones you need a second look at.
Yeah.
So the natural thing should be to let it go, see what happens, and then bring it back.
Yeah.
He's finally letting Bailey have a go. He's making sure Ramsey gets in the team. He's playing Louise. He's using only one of Watkins or Ings, and it worked. Defence looked good for once. I mean, we've bought 2 centre-backs and they didn't play, obviously a bit too soon. What do you do now?
Yeah, true. How important is it to have held on to Douglas Luiz?
Really important, because he's our best player. And I don't even think he's been injured, but he hasn't really been in the team that much recently, weirdly. You know, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Maybe there was arguments, maybe they thought he was going to go out the door. But how much is 25 million these days to a team like Villa, who, you know, their owners are billionaires? It's nothing. There was no point in letting him go for that amount of money.
But no, I agree with you, because who do you realistically go and bring in for that amount of money? Anybody who is going to be an improvement on him?
Not anywhere near him.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he had a similar sort of contract situation to Haaland, in that we got him really dirt cheap. I think it was like 12 million or something. And City had a
buyback on him.
Yeah, City had a buyback, which they didn't take him up on.
Because was it work permit issues when he first went to City?
Right at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
So they loaned him back out, didn't they? And then he came, and he's been brilliant ever since. And he's definitely got a big future, and I don't think his future is with Villa.
I was reading an article about him where
long term,
when Pep first bought him and he couldn't get the work permit, Pep was like sending videos and things to the people deciding whether he could get a work permit, promising him that he'd play for City for years and years and years. He was so sure that he was going to be a superstar. So, I mean, you can see why he's as good as he is now. He's obviously has some type of pedigree there. And again, Villa need to hold on to players like that for sure.
He's never played in an amazing team, and he's one of those players where if you just picked him up and popped him in a really good team, he would fit in.
Yeah, I think there was links to Liverpool on deadline day, wasn't there? It makes you wonder why they didn't. He would have improved your first 15 players massively, Louise, at this moment in time. It really does make you think they must surely be waiting for Bellingham, though, right?
Must be.
He's like, what?
Essentially.
They must be, the way that they've not bought somebody there, you'd think.
How good was Ashley Young?
Yeah, when it called
came on early, didn't he? And he was just... What a player.
I was worried when I saw him warming up. I was like, when he was coming on, because it was an injury, right? Cash went off injured. I was like,
he went off quite early.
This isn't what you want against City. It's Ashley Young at right back. No, he did great. He was really good.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Let's move through to the Sunday then. 2 fixtures on Sunday, and again, 2 very interesting ones, really. We'll start with the first one, which was Brighton beating Leicester 5-2. A bit of a topsy-turvy end-to-end game, with Brighton scoring 5 in the end, and Leicester, rock bottom of the Premier League, looking a bit shaky, Rory.
Yeah, that was... I can't believe how well McAllister and Gross have started the season. They've absolutely flying. Leicester, they get a first-minute goal. Everything looks like maybe it's set up for a big performance, and then they leak 5. It's just... that was the most Leicester 90 minutes of... If you said to somebody, look, I just want you to watch a team and you can see exactly what they're like this season, that was it, wasn't it? They go ahead early doors and then they ship 5 and get hammered, really. McAllister was really unlucky not to get the absolute worldie that he scored. You really worry for Leicester. How many games has Rodgers realistically got left with these types of performances? 2, 3?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I was really thinking about it. I was thinking, does he get a bit of a pass here because they've not backed him as owners? They've not given him the money to go and spend. They've now brought money in for Fofana. Does he get a little bit longer here because he can quite quite obviously say, well, you didn't give me any money to spend. What do you expect me to do? Give me January.
Things are looking so stale for him. He doesn't feel that interested in it, does he? So I feel like if anyone needs a managerial change, it's them. So do you give him that time, or do you let him go out on his terms? It's a real tough one.
You don't want to let him go out on his terms if it means that you're 12, 14 games in and Leicester have got 5 points or something, It's
No, that's what I mean, sorry. That's what I mean. So do you say to him now, right, we've built up some goodwill, so let's go out, let's stop this, but we'll make it more of your decision, so you're not like sending them out sort of thing into the wilderness.
One of those by mutual consent, which basically means
it works for everybody, rather than just getting rid of him. Yeah, rather than getting rid of him because he's built up enough goodwill to not do that. If that makes sense.
He's been really good there, hasn't he?
Get Big Sam in. Just get Big Sam in.
How long until Big Sam is brought in by one of these teams, by the way? It can't be that long.
He's normally a March, April kind of time, isn't he? 6 or 7 games left.
I
need 10
reckon we
points.
Might go early. Yeah. It'll be Deitch or Big Sam. Surely won't be long. Who do Bournemouth go for?
Well, the guy's doing well at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah.
Whether he takes it longer term, see what he does after. I think they give him a chance.
Possibly, because
for a month or so.
It's kind of what they want. Clearly, is this tight knit and goodwill in the squad, and go with what you've got, sort of thing. And if you go with your caretaker, then maybe you are just going with what you got, and it's kind of buys into that, doesn't it? Possibly.
Brighton looked brilliant, though, didn't they? Again.
Yeah, really good, and scoring goals, which was their issue last year, wasn't it? Scoring 5 in a game here just goes to show maybe they've made a few steps forward in that regard. And Leicester, not very good, but next week they've got Villa, so I'm sure they'll be back to winning.
Tough one. You know what I really liked about Brighton, though? Sorry, just before we move on.
Yeah.
They went 1-0 down, and they just didn't care.
In the first
they were just like, all right.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, fine. And then they just hammered them then for the next 90 minutes. Yeah, they looked brilliant. Potter's magic, isn't he?
Really good manager.
Yeah,
hopefully he sticks out. I mean, that was a joke. I thought I'd get a few more laughs. But hopefully he sticks out until the end of the season, because I think some other teams will come swooping pretty soon.
Why did it take me so long to get that? I've only just realised what you meant. Christ's sake.
How high could he go? Realistically?
You're going to do some type of broom thing here, aren't you?
No, we moved on.
Oh, did we?
No, you swept it under the carpet. We've moved on.
Oh,
I would love him to manage England.
Is it totally different, though? He's working with these players day in, day out, isn't he? As opposed to getting a couple of weeks at St George's Park, then he didn't see him again for 3 months. How I always think this, like we say, he'd be great for England, and I think he would. I am firmly in that camp as well. But is it so different when you're trying to? He's not maybe stylistically drilling those players every day. How easy is it to kind of embed your style on a team in just a couple of weeks?
It's a really, really weird. International management is a really weird one. To be good at international management, you kind of have to do all the things you wouldn't usually do as a club manager. That's why I think some of the most successful, when you think of like Jogi Löw at Germany, right, kind of is very much an international manager. It's a really weird one. But yeah, on Brighton.
Point there, Rory. That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely is. Just thinking of Brighton, Trossard has got a wand of a left foot, hasn't he?
Moving on.
Right. Final game of the weekend is.
I tried my hardest not to laugh. I enjoyed that. I was holding off. I was going to mute myself. And laugh on mute, just not give you the credit for it.
That was deafening silence. I'll tell you that. Jeez. Final game of the weekend was a high-profile one. It was Manchester United 3, Arsenal 1. Are United quite good?
No, I've got a lot to say about this. Can I jump in?
Go on.
It was a weird game, first and foremost, but United are just a dislikable team, aren't they?
They are.
That Anthony was charging into people, shouting their faces like an absolute idiot. The goal saved him because some of his output and unnecessary flicks were just embarrassing yesterday.
What did you make of his the celebration, the tiger? What did you make of that?
Just weird.
It was. I
mean, I don't support Arsenal, but it was just annoying me. And United, like always, they've just sort of bought their way out of their problems, haven't they? Ericsson looks like their best player. And it's just quite weird how Twitter hasn't been inundated with abuse towards the Glazers for the last few weeks.
Oh, yeah, they're quite in that regard, haven't they? Yeah.
And Martin Tyler and Gary Neville commenting on a United game. The bias, again, is just strange.
Yeah, I guess that's just the history, isn't it? What they were. And it's difficult to shake people's thinking of that, even though they're nowhere near what they were under Ferguson. It's the legacy that's been built up. It's very true.
And the VR decision was annoying, wasn't it? It was just always going to happen. It was just, when it comes to Old Trafford, it's just a given. When Villa played them last year, we touched on this a couple of times, how hard they were looking for in that VAR to find something for Mings. Do you remember? And that's just what it feels like at Old Trafford. Let's get VAR and find something.
Sounds like a Tony Bellew conspiracy to me a little bit, but
I mean, genuinely, how can United manage just to snaffle all of the worst imaginable blokes that play at high-level European football? Casemiro, Lisandro Martinez, Antony, Bruno Fernandes. I mean, the list just goes on and on. I don't want to use some provocative language here because that's not what we pride ourselves on at Panenka. But my God, honestly.
Yeah. Some very, very dislikable footballers. And that kind of brings us on to one of our topics today. I wonder, boys, do you want to do VAR first? Or one of our last things to talk about today is we're going to suggest who is, for us, the most dislikable footballer in the Premier League. And we've all got our own suggestions. We're going to take it to Twitter. We're going to get you guys to vote on who you think is the most dislikable. But VAR or dislikable footballers?
Let's touch on VAR, I think, just because it's a bit fresh in our mind after that chat.
I agree. Let's go back to my question that I asked earlier on then, where we've talked about some of those poor decisions. We've talked about the United one with the Ericsson foul. We've talked about the Newcastle one with the foul on the goalkeeper. Obviously, we've got the West Ham disallowed goal with Bowen on Mendy. It was a real weekend of poor officiating and poor use of VAR, because I think, again, we need to talk about the fact that it's not VAR that is actually the issue here. It's the people who are operating it, who are making the decisions. They've been given these tools to make the correct decisions, and they're still not. And that's the consensus with nearly everybody watching it, that they're still making the wrong decisions. So how do you fix it? What do you do? You're now head of the refereeing board. You can change things. What do you do, Rory?
Well, I think first things first is you need to tackle the actual on-field officiating first, don't you? The level of officiating in this country is so bad. Now, I don't know if this comes down to, the average age of officials in this country is probably, 38, 39? They're running around and trying to officiate on, some of the fittest athletes in England. Now, some say that's not a big issue, they have to pass fitness tests, whatever. But sometimes they're so far behind the play or so unable to kind of be up with play or position themselves in the right place to see fouls or penalty shouts that immediately they're overly reliant on VAR. You can link that to the linesmans. You take the Conor Cody decision, for example, on Saturday. Now, as soon as you saw one replay, you're like, God, he's about 3 yards offside. But the linesman doesn't want to put his flag up because he is going to be seen as the villain. He puts his flag up, it's subsequently onside, he's the villain. But the point is, he is paid to make a decision. Once the ball goes in the goal, it's then his job. Does he want to put the flag up and say, actually, I thought I was offside, but we're going to look at it anyway? Or I'm going to keep the flag down and I'm just going to bank on VAR? Now, I think the position seems to have become...
Just to jump in.
Go on.
Sorry. Do you think this is to do with... Do you think this is an issue with how easily influenced the referees are, or how aware of the culture of football in the country, in that they're going to be slated and they're influenced by the crowd? Do you think does it boil down to that they're not making decisions based on what they are seeing at that time, but they're influenced, whether consciously or subconsciously, they're influenced by the circus around football?
Well, I think
it has to have an effect.
I think it has to, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what we say. There is still influence around the big teams. There must be something to it, mustn't there? I don't know if that's because the fans or what it is, but there is an element to that. But I guess my point is we have an issue that officials seem to have become overly reliant on VAR. Well, it doesn't matter if I get it wrong. VAR will look at it. doesn't matter if I don't want to blow the whistle, VAR will bail me out.
But then they go to VAR and they're still terrified to get it wrong, in that they then don't make the common sense decisions. They go and look so closely at every little thing and get their rule book out and look, well, actually it says about... And they're still terrified to make a call, it feels to me. And then they won't come out, and we don't hear from them where they come and back it and give any reasons. It's this, we just have to get on with it despite everybody watching it thinking... Well, I disagree.
Well, everyone's
with that.
fear wasn't it behind VAR. Well, it will eliminate these kind of conversations out of football. The people down the pub won't be able to say, "Oh no, that was offside, that was onside, that was a penalty, it wasn't a penalty." It's become worse. It's genuinely probably become worse. And
yeah, because actually we don't have that debate anymore. There's no debate in it. It's because we still don't agree on decisions, but we've then got a whole other thing in there, in that we've drawn lines on things and we've got this new rule to talk about, which it's boring. Like I didn't think I would, because I've been very pro VAR for a while, because I think it was a long time of complaining about those decisions and thinking, why aren't we using technology? And I think technology in football is something that's been needed for a while, but I miss the days where you'd play a ball through, you'd look at the linesman, oh, he's got his flag down, get in, we're in here. And not have to worry about it. Do you know how much I enjoyed that Leon Bailey equaliser? Because it's Ramsey, right? He takes it and dribbles it in, and because he dribbles it through himself and then pulls it back, there was no question that it was going to be offside at any point in that. I watched it go in, going, they can't disallow that. There's nothing in it. They can't disallow that. And I could actually be happy that City had conceded a goal without thinking, well, they'll find something to chalk this one off.
Sorry. I was going to say, I guess I started answering your point, but then just got so worked up actually getting annoyed about VAR.
Me too.
I guess my point was that there's two parts to this. Do we just need to realise that 40-year-old referees maybe aren't able to keep up with the pace of play, and that maybe we need to be trying to blood referees in earlier? Now, that comes down to a lot of things. There's that common thing, isn't there, that every young boy who's at school, Rich, you may be able to answer this, but given your profession, they want to be a footballer. I want to be a professional footballer. Nobody ever says I want to be a referee. Just because you don't, they're seen as like the cannon fodder of the game, rightly or wrongly. There's just this stigma around going and refereeing. Now, particularly at grassroots football, because of the amount of abuse you get.
Well, I was going to say, because also it is by, like, even the abuse,
it's a thankless
rightly or
task.
wrongly, it's a thankless task. Why would anyone want to do that and subject themselves to that?
But is there an element that we need to remunerate refs better? We need to try and do more to attract perhaps a better quality, a bigger pool of people. Think about the money involved in the game. Now, I know these refs aren't hard up, Christ, they earn more than most people, but is there an element there that maybe chucking a bit of money at these referees and trying to just diversify the pool and make the pool of referees bigger might help? And the other point is there a way that we can just... I mean, there's got to be a lack of teaching or a lack of learning here, because they're so inconsistent. Now, you should surely be able to make a panel of... We've only really got 20 to 25 top referees for the Premier League, right? They all roughly do one fixture a weekend. There just seems to be so much inconsistency between that small number of people that how on earth are we not able to say, look, this is what we're looking for this. This is what we're looking for this. This is how the handballs are done. This is how the little niggly fouls are done. It's like the common debate of, well, if that was outside the box, it would be a foul. Well, why isn't it a foul then? Do you know what I mean? Why is there a higher threshold when it's in the box? There just seems to be such inconsistency.
That's my point on this. That there's not just rules. There's rules to the rules. And then there's levels to each one. Like you just say, there's fouls that exist in the box that don't exist outside. There's fouls that don't exist in the box that exist outside the box. But that's an unwritten rule. But we all sort of accept it because of the way that referees have managed it. When really, are we overruling the game? Are we overcomplicating things? Where my thing is, how do you fix VAR? I think you apply a bit of common sense. And I really feel like it's as simple as that there should be maybe a head VAR person in the box watching who just then, when there's a bit of a debate, they make the call. And then that person is paid a load of money to make that call, first of all, but also comes out and defends it and talks about it and is the face of that decision. And
held to judgment for it.
Yeah. Exactly. But because so many times I'm watching these things, I'm just thinking, just apply the common sense here. and they're not, because they've got this rule in there, and I've mentioned it a load of times in this podcast already today, but they're overthinking things. It feels like they're overthinking things. And is that because of the reaction they know they're going to get? Is that because they have got too many rules? Is that because they know that it's the culture of football and there's so much going on, and they have these influences and they're subconscious? I don't know why it's happening, but just apply a bit of common sense.
Yeah, my biggest question is, does it add more to the game than it takes away? I don't think it does. You can forgive a bad decision from a ref without VAR, with all the factors included. Pace of the game, they only see it once. But when we have the review and the decisions are still terrible, it makes the emotion so much worse.
Yeah, agreed.
And you just lose that joy of scoring, like you touched upon earlier. You've run away screaming, but you have to contain yourself and wait for the review. It's just not the same. So we may as well be without it. But that's okay. That's the whole point of trying things and innovating. Yeah. You try something, you think, actually, this doesn't work. So let's just not bother.
There was that fabulous clip on Twitter. Can you remember when Tottenham scored really late? City scored really late against Tottenham in the semi-final of the Champions League, and then it got ruled out because Sterling was like a fingernail offside. And they interviewed a City fan after the game outside the ground, and he was like, "Oh, you must be absolutely gutted for that goal to be ruled out." And he was like, "What on earth are you talking about? We won." And he just hadn't even realised it had been varred off. So he was too busy celebrating. Yeah. It's just like, when did the game become like that?
Yeah, I really thought that point about the not enjoying the let off and not being able to enjoy goals. I thought that point was being overstated at the start. I thought, okay, it's not that bad. At least they're getting the right decisions. Like, I don't think that's as big a deal as people are making out to be, but I've come full circle on it, and
it's a huge deal. I think
it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It's you're losing the very joy of football.
Rich, I think to answer your question, what do we do to make it better? To me, there's one simple thing we can do that solves a lot of these questions, and that is putting a time limit on it, 30 seconds to a minute.
That is actually a really good idea.
Well, Well,
because what that does is, one, it makes
apply common sense, right?
You have to apply common sense, and then it's clear and obvious. If you can't make a decision in 30 seconds, don't bother. That Brighton decision in the Brighton game, which was the right decision, the only right VAR decision, in my opinion, this weekend, that took 4 minutes and 31 seconds to do. Not clear and obvious, but you should remove the thresholds as well, like you said. There shouldn't be levels of interpretation. It should just the rules could be as clear as they can be.
But you let the referee make his professional judgment on it then, don't you? Rather than he's not actually making his professional judgment in these times. He's looking up the rules and saying what the rule applies here. Like, there's no trust in the referees, and then maybe because of the standard of refereeing. But I feel like if we actually just gave a little bit more trust back, I think they'd come to the right decision more often. I feel like in rugby, there's so much more trust in the referees, and it's like a cliche to say, but look at how they do it in rugby. But it is true. It is actually true.
It is, because how biased and unreasonable are fans and managers for their own team? Yeah. And that's some of the problem. These refs are probably thinking, and the VAR and everybody, the Premier League for the refs, are probably thinking, people are so unreasonable in what they interpret. It doesn't matter what goes on. If it's against their team, they're going to hate it. If it's for their team, they're going to love it. And because of that, we're going to get all these issues no matter what. And that really contributes a lot to its downfall. You can't have a genuine debate with someone. You can't have a genuine discussion about whether something was right or wrong. It always just gets completely blinded by who you support. For a lot
I was just going to link to that Clayt said, in cricket. Now, I know I mentioned cricket at the start as well, didn't we? But if they have a catch which they're not quite sure if it's bounced first, the hands are kind of, not quite round the ball, they do what's called a soft signal. So the on-field umpire says, "I thought it was out, I thought it was not out." Now, what the TV monitor ref, or whatever they're called in cricket, third umpire, does is, if he cannot find conclusive evidence that the on-field umpire is wrong, they just stick with a soft signal. Now, is there not an element for that, where the VAR, the person on the field says, "I didn't think it was a foul"? Okay, well, and you link this to Sean's point of, well, you get 30 seconds to look at 2 or 3 replays. I can't find conclusive evidence that it was different to that. Let's just stick to what we said on field. There's no conclusive evidence to kind of overrule it.
Is that not what they're trying to do with the clear and obvious thing? That sounds like that's exactly what they're trying to do with the clear and obvious thing.
But
the actual, the way the implementation of it has just been completely wrong. That they take it too far and over officiate everything instead, rather than, all right, he thought it was a penalty as he watched it the first time. Is he massively wrong? Again, 30 seconds, have a quick look at it. It could go either way. We'll stick with his decision. There's been examples where they've done that perfectly, but there's been so many examples where, like with the Manchester United one with Eriksen, where they've gone, oh, let's watch it 12 times. I think he was really wrong. What?
I know. How can you? Because if he was really wrong, they should have thought that at the first second.
Yeah.
Like an offside. Wow. Okay. There's daylight. He's clearly offside. Takes 2 seconds. Again, if you have to start getting the lines out and letting the pause stop, just so it happens at the exact same second. As soon as you start messing around with all this, it takes the fun out of the game.
Yeah. And also, like, we haven't even talked about the offsides, but how can we be doing these offsides when it's the frames they are using where it matters? Yeah. All it comes down to at the end of the day is where they've pressed pause. Because they could decide based on where they've pressed pause whether it's a goal or not a goal. So you actually put the hands of the game there has just been put in one guy in a van is deciding whether it's a goal or not. Because he could let it run for one more frame and he's still the time when he's releasing the ball and he's onside. Whereas,
I don't think you should pause it. We shouldn't be doing frozen screens. You should just let the game run.
It's like somebody trying to measure a world record using a stopwatch in the Olympics. See where he presses.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop.
And we've got a blurry screen, blurry image from the wrong angle, and we've got Tony Bellew thinking, like, not understanding depth perception. Sorry to bring him up again.
He's going to call in next week. We got Klopp and Bellew next week with the call-ins. Can't wait.
That would be a blockbuster pay-per-view. Should we leave it there on the VAR chat? I feel like we could go round in circles.
We could talk about this for months, couldn't we?
Easily.
Just get rid of it. Get rid of it.
Is that the answer? We'd love to hear from you guys as well in the comments down below if you're watching or listening over on YouTube. Let us know, how would you fix VAR? What is the quick fix here, if there is one? We'd love to hear from you either, or let us know on Twitter as well, alternatively. Let's move through to our fun little finisher, as we do like to do in some episodes. We're going to try and do this in future episodes too. A fun little finisher to maybe lift the mood after what was a bit of a rant from all of us there. I have tasked each of us to come up with their most disliked Premier League footballer, and we're going to pitch who we think it should be, and then we're going to go to Twitter and get you guys to vote on who you think is the most disliked Premier League footballer. I will let Rory go first on this one, because actually I think you've gone a bit left field here and a bit obscure. Who is the most disliked person in the Premier League?
I like how you've quickly changed the question there, Rich, because I was kind of grimacing when you were saying player, but I kind of wanted to go a little bit different so we haven't all got the same, because I could quite happily say the two that you've gone for, but I've actually gone for Antonio Conte. Now, there's just something about, I don't know if it's Spurs teams in general or this particular Spurs team, but I just find them particularly unlikable. Now, I know I gave credit to his quite humorous Instagram post the other week about saying he would have tripped Tuchel up if he would have seen him, but that is just the absolute epitome of what this man is about, isn't it? He's just an absolute wind-up. I mean, he's got his defender pulling Kukureya's hair. He's got Son, who, I don't know how Son gets this nice guy image. He broke somebody's leg, cried into the camera and got more sympathy than the bloke who broke his leg. Harry Kane up front. Some people absolutely despise Harry Kane. I will like him because he plays for England. I hate him when he plays for Spurs. They just seem like such an unlikable team. They've got Højbjerg and Bissouma that just love fouling. They've got, I won't go too much into Richarlison, so I don't want to spoil it for everyone else, but they've even signed Richarlison, who seems like an absolute perfect fit for Conte. It's just Spurs all over, isn't it? They just seem like a really dislikable unit, and Conte in particular just seems like he sums everything up. I didn't know that you could get a downgrade from Mourinho in terms of the housery, but Conte may well be that man.
I'll tell you what, though, Spurs must love this. It seems very Spurs, like us against the world, and I think it's to be honest, to get Spurs to a place where they can challenge. This is exactly what they needed. They needed this siege mentality. That's why they signed the likes of Richarlison. And I know, like, Spurs fans absolutely adore him already, and they obviously adore Conte too. So, as much as the rest of the Premier League are despising them, and I take your point on all of those things you just said, it is kind of like, They love him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. But
Bonds a team, doesn't
he's
it?
just a horrid bloke, I think.
Horrid bloke. That is a perfect way to sum it up. Thank you very much. So, first suggestion for the most hated Premier League footballer is Antonio Conte, the manager. Tiges, what do you think?
Yeah, well, this leads on to mine. Richarlison, he's the biggest house because he revels in it. Some people do it to get them advantage, but he just loves it. It gives him some kind of sick thrill. Like, I bet you he's a nightmare around the house. I bet you he just like hides socks and he just pours the tomato ketchup out and leaves empty things. He leaves the toilet seat up. Those keepy uppies last week were enough for him to warrant top spot in this. That's all you need to say. When that Everton fan created a fake bus company so the Liverpool fans missed their trip to Champions League, they set the company name up in his name. That is all you need to know. He threw a flare into the crowd. He snaps at people, he snarls, he's dramatic.
Do you not love it though? Like all of these things.
I don't hate him. I don't hate him. I do love him. He's such a good character to have. He posted a picture of him squaring up to Bellerin of Arsenal on Instagram the day he moved to Spurs. Like he had barely taken his pen off signing the paper before he got out his phone and started being a dick.
He actually moved to Spurs so that he could do that photo.
That was his judgment. He went through his photos and said, right, this is the worst one I can post. I'm going to Spurs. And how good was Karma this weekend when he scored, took his top off, celebrated like a nutcase, only for the goal to be disallowed and him to receive a booking. Thank God for VAR.
Thank God for VAR. Do you know what I saw about that, though, by the way? Which is, again, this Spurs siege mentality. I saw Spurs fans on Twitter saying, surely the yellow should be rescinded then. No, he still took his top off. That did happen.
That sums up football fans. That does. How have you come to that conclusion?
honestly. Yeah, so we've got Antonio Conte and Richarlison, and I'm not going to go down the Spurs route for my one because I feel like that's a bit harsh. And do you know what? I think they're both blockbuster. They're both worth the entry fee, and I'm glad they're in our league. I'm going to go with, I think, the most dislikable player in the league by a long distance, Bruno Fernandes. There is not an ounce of that man that garners my respect. I can't tell you how much he winds me up. It's from like his constant moaning at the ref. It is constant to how easily he goes down when he's fouled or when he's tackled, to how he takes his penalties. You know, when he started doing the Jorginho one, I was just sort of, course you're doing a Jorginho penalty. How annoying. Like, I think of the Liverpool game a few weeks ago where he was holding onto the ball after the Salah goal. I just think, of course it's you doing that. His little annoying face. I beg you to find someone more dislikable than Bruno Fernandes.
I saw a video of him where he opened the door, and not only did he not hold it open for a woman who was behind him, but he like pulled it shut.
Why did that video even exist?
God.
And why am I not surprised by it?
But he's a different type of emotion to Conte and Richarlison.
Yeah, they're like wind-up merchants, whereas Bruno, I don't think is doing it to wind people up. I think he's doing it because I bet he's got a really squeaky, whiny voice. Yeah, as well.
He is an annoying bloke.
I think that makes him more dislikable for me because he's not doing it deliberately. Whereas you can kind of see, like with Richarlison, you can kind of go, even if it's annoying you can kind of go, oh, he's won then, hasn't he? Because
he understands what he's doing. Whereas I bet you if you sat down with Richarlison in the pub and said, "You're a dick, aren't you?" he'd laugh and he'd say yes. Whereas if you said that to Fernandes, he honestly wouldn't think he does anything wrong.
He'd be asking for a penalty.
Yeah, he'd be like, he'd fall over. He'd say, "You're a dick, aren't you?" And he'd start rolling on the floor, and you'd get booked.
So I'm confident in this Twitter poll. Make sure you do go over to Twitter. It's
so they can only vote for ours. Is that right?
Yeah, it's out of those three. Those are our suggestions. I'm welcoming any types of if anybody wants to suggest any other ones. And I did actually tweet this asking for some suggestions. Let me read a couple of them because some of them are pretty good and some of them are very rogue and outside of the box shouts. But I said, who are the most dislikable players in the Prem? Quite a few people mentioning Kurt Zouma. For obvious reasons. Lots of Richarlison, lots of Bruno, Lots of Azpilicueta. Can you get behind that one?
That's a bit of a strange one. I don't mind him too much.
He annoys me when Liverpool are playing Chelsea, I will say, because he is constantly on the ref's back and he's quite good at the dark arts. But when they're not playing Liverpool, I think he's sound. I think he's all right.
Yeah, I don't think he's as bad as the others.
No. Andy Robertson, loads of shouts on Twitter. Loads of shouts for Andy Robertson. I wouldn't know because I love it because he plays for my team, but I can kind of see that. He's a bit of a house, isn't he, as well? Harvey Elliott, by the way. This one I think is a bit rogue, but so many people saying Harvey Elliott. I think it might be to do with his hair and the sort of ego he seems to have, which I think is a really good thing. It's going to take him quite far. The best comment, though, by far on this was somebody replied to my tweet just saying, Scott McTominay should be locked up and thrown in jail. No other reasons. That was it. And I thought, right, there you go.
No context.
And
no context.
No context, no reasons. I didn't ask him. I actually replied saying, "Oh right."
But surely he's just because he's so bad at football. Surely he's just. I don't really get that one.
Yeah, someone else did say, no one hates a player that's rubbish.
Apart from him.
Except for Scott McTominay, who should be locked up and thrown in jail. And with that, I think we'll finish off our episode for today. Thank you very much for listening. Unless you're Scott McTominay, in which case, get back in your cell, my friends.
Or
we will be
Bellew,
back.
or Klopp.
Or Tony Bellew, or Klopp, or Richarlison, or Antonio Conte. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, though. If you are not already subscribed to the YouTube channel and you are listening on YouTube, please make sure you do so. Leave us those comments down below. We'll be back next Tuesday after another round of Premier League action, after some Champions League games as well. We hope you have a lovely rest of your week. We'll see you very soon.
Goodbye.